Richard Sutcliffe, who's written the book Revie, Revered and Reviled, and John Ray, who covered Leeds United for 40 years, are in Leeds. Henry Winter in the studio with me. Richard, we have been very complimentary about him and looked at all the positives. But there is this fact, isn't there, that the Don Revie's nickname, which actually doesn't work now that Duncan has categorically confirmed it's Revie, not Revie, has hung over him even since he died.
Absolutely. And it does date back to the manner in which he left England, which obviously he had regrets about later in life. He went for this great contract. But the thing that's sort of overlooked as well is that he jumped before he was pushed. Lord Harwood, who's been the Leeds United president since 1961 and still is today, I went to see him for the book, and it was fantastic listening to him and his memories of the time. And he was the FA president for a good stint, and he was talking to the chairman of Ipswich one time while Don was still in the England job, and he said the FA had been in touch asking for permission to speak to Bobby Robson about the job. He told Don that, and I think that's what made his mind up about it. Because of how these things work, Henry, as Richard says, yeah, OK, he jumped before he was pushed. Was his biggest error, knowing Fleet Street, as it was called then, his biggest error was selling that story as an exclusive to one paper, which turned every other paper against him?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that has to be said is that very few England managers leave with much decorum. It's the nature of the job. I mean, they tend, if the results were going well, they probably wouldn't be leaving the building. Clearly, there were issues with the FA. Harold Thompson, who was the chairman at the time, just had an issue with Revie, and whether it was a personality clash, whether it was a social thing, but there was a real problem there. But yes, I mean, the moment one individual, whether it's a player or a manager, does a deal with one paper, he can expect to get whacked by the rest of Fleet Street. He
did make enemies easily, did he, John?
Well, Don had a problem with Alan Hardacre as well, the Football League secretary at the time, who, of course, ordered Leeds to play at Wolves in a title decider on the Monday after they'd just won the FA Cup at Wembley. Now, who would expect a team these days to do that? Absolutely ludicrous. And I'm convinced to this day that it was Hardacre's dislike of Don and Leeds United that forced that decision. I can't imagine even then that he would have ordered any other team to do that.
Do you both of you think in Leeds that there was a very anti-Leeds agenda from the south of England?
I certainly do, yes. I mean, I've actually seen it with my own eyes. There was a classic case where I turned up for one game at Chelsea, and I was sitting behind a very renowned national newspaper man, and it was 20-3. The match, of course, kicked off at 3. They used to do in those days, on a Saturday, all the time. And this guy was scribbling away, and I couldn't resist. I had to look over his shoulder, and he was writing this report about sparks flying off the pitch every time Billy Bremner went in for a challenge. He'd written his piece before the game even kicked off. That was the reputation Leeds had, and the Southern press did milk it for all it was worth.
They had very early deadlines then, so he had to get his copy over before the match.
Not that early.
But Richard, was it also a Southern agenda that got into accusations of Don Revie offering players money to take it easy, which came out in the Sunday Mirror or the People, I think, in 1977?
Well, we go after that one. It follows on from him going with the Mail. With the exclusive story, because once the Mail had that story, and it's the story of the year, it's probably the story of the decade. It was absolutely fantastic tale, and they're chasing the tail after that. They're out of the loop, and
but also, Richard, more than one club made allegations that Revie had done this, and whereas Billy Bremner sued, Don didn't.
It's a big regret of his family, and also Lord Harwood I went to see. They don't understand why he didn't, because it was the Wolves game, which was, like I said, Billy won £100,000 in 1983 with the same story in 1977 with the People, and it's one of these things you can never change it now. I spoke to Kim, his daughter, and she wishes so much that he had done it, because then he could have wiped it away. But now, he'll never be able to prove that it wasn't the case.
But surely the record at the time, just looking back at what Leeds won, the fact that they finished second so often showed that it can't have been going on.
He can't have paid him enough, can he, really? When you look at some of the games, look at the finals they lost, never mind, finishing second so many times. I think, it's one of these things, that team just wasn't liked, particularly down south, but outside of Leeds. And whether people have been waiting for 10 years to have a go at him, I don't know. But obviously they went to the FA with this so-called dossier, but it's never been produced. During the time when Don took the FA to the High Court, because they put a 10-year ban on him for leaving the England job, you'd have thought these accusations might have been brought up in court if they were trying to prove what a despicable man he was, but there was no mention of them whatsoever.
I mean, the
ban was subsequently lifted as well, Richard.
Do you think the FA held a grudge with him all the way to his death and afterwards?
Well, nobody turned up at his funeral, which...
From the FA?
From the FA, sorry, yeah.
I mean, every other club that he represented was there.
All the clubs, all the referees, which you think if Leeds were that bad, they wouldn't turn up, but the referees were represented. Kevin Keegan flew in. Many of his England players, his old teammates, obviously all his old Leeds team were there. A group of Leeds United supporters went up. Gary Edwards, who's one of the biggest fans that Leeds have got, they all travelled up there. But there was, like I say in the book, it's how I finish it. There was one glaring omission, and it was the FA, and there wasn't one person in Leeds who was surprised by that.
He died on the night that Arsenal beat Liverpool 2-0 at Anfield, didn't he, through Michael Thomas, which meant that his death didn't get the same amount of attention as it would normally have done?
Yeah, there's some obituaries. Jeff Powell did a lovely piece because he was very friendly. From the Mail.
Jeff Powell was the man that he sold the story to, wasn't he?
He got the exclusive, yeah, but it was very friendly with Jeff, full stop. But the rest of them, even the obituaries that did appear, obviously with a momentous night like they had with the Michael Thomas goal, that's going to wipe, and that's going to cut down space in any newspaper. But even the mentions that were given, the obituaries usually are lovely, touching pieces. But after 2 or 3 paragraphs, they were all about Leeds being a dirty side and him leaving the England job. And even in death, he didn't really get any peace off the certain areas of Fleet Street.
We don't have very long left. You've heard me ask everybody else who he's most like as a modern manager. John?
Well, everybody's said Sir Alex. I go along with that, but I also go along with Jock Stein, because like Don, Jock was a big man in every respect. Everyone who played under Jock Stein, who I've spoken to, have said that they would... If they wanted a wage rise or something like that, they would knock on his door with trepidation. And but once they got in there, they found that he was a very, very fair man. And that was the same with Don. He would go through hoops for his players. Jock Stein was the same, and I'm sure Alex Ferguson is just the same.
Henry?
As well.
When you mention dossiers, I immediately think of Jose Mourinho. But I think what's going to be very interesting, the guys would know better than I would. But are there plans for a statue to Revie when they extend one of the stands?
There are. Yes, I've always thought Leeds, as a city, has been quite shy of its debt that it owes Don Revie. I went to the testimonial game when he was in a wheelchair with the motor neurones a year before he died, and you think of all that he did for Leeds as a city and Leeds United, and 7,500 people turned up, which I know it was in the 80s when Leeds were struggling as a club and the average crowd was sort of 16,000, but even so I thought that was poor. And
you'd get more now, even now, wouldn't you? Actually?
Absolutely.
Who would you say as a modern manager, Richard?
I'm afraid, well, it will be Sir Alex. I did ask the same question of quite a few people when I was researching the book. People like Trevor Cherry, and they all said exactly the same. When
you were going to begin that sentence with "I'm afraid," is that weren't you? Which no, but I think that's fascinating, given the hatred, and let's be honest, it is, between Manchester United fans and Leeds fans. Is there not an irony in that this comparison keeps coming up?
Absolutely. But that's exactly what they were. You look at Shankly as well at Liverpool. They're all the same character, and Busby at Manchester United. They're all the same, all sort of carved from the same wood. It's phenomenal, really.
Do you think the vitriolic message boards on both sides of the Pennines will be having a go at us for those comparisons, or will they just take a step back and think?
You'd hope not, because like Duncan said, him and Don and Sir Matt were fantastic friends, and they obviously there was a rivalry between them because they both wanted to win, and a rivalry between the clubs, and their teams would kick each other off the pitch, but deep down they respected each other, and it'd be nice if everyone did the same.
Henry, maybe a quick 20 seconds on Don Revie's legacy?
Well, I just think there are people within the FA and the organisation itself who should just feel shamefaced about this. I mean, it's, Lord Harvard said it in Richard's book. They kept Revie's reputation down. They allowed it to remain tarnished.
John Ray in Leeds and Richard Sutcliffe in Leeds, who is the author of Revie, Revered and Reviled. Thank you very much for your company.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you to both of them. Henry as well, thank you for the past couple of hours.
Pleasure.